A beautiful Friday. Absolutely beautiful Friday to do this with you guys. Who doesn't love a lovely Friday, right?
That's right.
Before we get started here, um, do we have a conversation about the tweet that we all woke up to this morning or no? I guess we probably don't.
Is that the one
And
about is that the salary
Oh,
thing?
well,
yeah,
yeah, but
yeah.
I
the
heard
only
one
thing
in
about
about it.
the only thing that was
Go
great
ahead, Ed.
about that tweet was like, that I thought was utterly accurate was, who brings it to this show every week and who mails it in. I mean, I thought that was spot on accurate,
Uh-huh.
right? I mean, Bundy,
Hmm.
the guy was saying how you and I come well prepared every episode. We rock it out. We're awesome, and Russ mails it in.
I don't know if I
Yeah,
go that
no,
high.
I thought that was kind
Listen,
of like accurate. I go, well, that was a good
You're
tweet.
going to be
it's
able
just
to pull
hurtful.
that up. I haven't seen that one yet. I'll have to
It's
scour
just
that
it's
as
just
I'm going.
hurtful. It's hurtful. I woke up to that tweet and I went, "What the hell happened?" I'm like, tweet said, "Why are you in Anthony Gargano's wallet?" I'm like, I didn't know I lost that much weight I could fit into Gargano's wallet, but okay. And then guy's upset that Crossing Broad ran Gargano's contract and his salary. $300,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
It's a good gig,
Now
man.
it's not as much as Cataldi was making.
No, Cataldi was over $1 million.
Now that's good money.
Yeah,
That's good
Cataldi
money.
was over $1 million, and I believe
Wasn't Missinelli
Missinelli,
over? Wasn't Missinelli over
he
six?
was over. He might have been over 6 by the end, but I remember at one point he was over 5. And I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I think Cuz has been around 3 for a while, though. That's the thing. Like, I think that if I remember, like when he was at WIP back in the day, I think he was around 225 to 250. So I mean,
Wow.
I mean, look, I know we're talking upgrades of $50,000. Most people will be like, "Oh, I got a $50,000 raise. That's awesome." So over the course of time, that's probably about, I guess, industry standard.
Yeah.
Um, Although that's likely coming down now. I don't think anybody in his gig is going to be getting that kind of money anymore. So,
No.
but anyway,
All right, guys. Well,
yeah.
I guess we can have a little bit of fun here on this beautiful morning where we gave nobody a heads up that we were going to be doing this. But we have people here because we have the best viewers, the best listeners in business.
The fact that people are always on and
Mhm.
ready to talk Flyers
And ready. Yeah.
is fascinating to me, and I love it. I love the fact that our folks are just out there in the world doing their thing, minding their own business. They look at their phone, they get an alert. And it's like, guys, drop everything. We're gonna go talk Flyers with the boys. Like, I think that's awesome. I think that the fact that
Right.
there are people out there like that, it makes art.
I had, I did a couple things this week at Westchester, right? I put it out there and talked to the kids about, addiction and it's just life in general, kind of. And it was a great presentation by the Chester County DA, Deb Ryan, who spent better part of 2 weeks prior chasing after newfound Eagles fan, Cavalcante. And we had a little chance I had a little chance to talk to her about that a little bit. And I guess the part that just kind of amazed everybody was the climbing. Still just kind of the most revered climbing. And she actually said, usually stuff like that we don't share with the public, but we had to show this is how the guy got out, because nobody could understand how this possibly guy could have gotten out of the prison. So, but you know what? We're talking about Snow the Goalie. I have these, and you talk about different uh, groups of people that listen and love the Flyers. And I had these two young ladies come up to me, probably sophomores or juniors in college, because I'm thinking they're about my daughter's age, my youngest daughter. And they said, you know what? We are so upset that we missed the banter on Snow the Goalie. And I'm like, oh my God, these two young girls are Snow the Goalie listeners, and they're aware of the banter. And I thought that was so cool, because you get a variant of 20-something girls to, we do have, 65-year-old men that listen too. So I thought that was just really, really cool. And I asked them, I said, you guys are listeners. We never miss anything ever, Chris. And I'm like, wow, that's so cool. So thank you for that. And it is really cool when I go out and I get a little bit of that from people out there from the messaging. But Man, I'll talk about a different trajectory, right? The college kids and female listeners like that, hockey fans, which is awesome. And then you got an older generation too that really pay attention to it. So I think that stuff like that, I just love for the fans. It's so cool. It really is.
There's a story. Let's go live because there's a story that also needs to get told about an interaction that you recently had. That'll make Ant's head is already big. All right, and it's about to like bleed into the other two panes on here. So let's get this thing going. So, all right,
I have no idea what you're talking about. But this, before you do go live, this is a reminder for you, Russ, that for those young ladies and also anyone else who maybe just listens on the podcast feed, it's a good reminder to let them know that we usually have at 5 to 10 minute banter on the YouTube, and if they miss it and want to catch it, they got to go back and watch the YouTube feed. So it's a good reminder for you in your little promotional thing when you start the show.
Bundy, you just saw what happened, right? And you heard what happened with Ant right there, right? Did you see and hear that? That delay?
I was telling Russ how to do his job.
That delayed feed. No. It's just your internet connection is back to being your internet connection.
He has the phone wire plugged in wrong.
Oh, that's right. Yep. All right, guys, let's get the show going today. Big thank you to everybody who's joining us live. We'll get going with the regularly scheduled program here in a second. And here we go.
This is Dan Hilferty. Welcome to Snow the Goalie. You're in for a treat.
Oh, yes! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast, the People's podcast, the Players podcast, Prognosticators podcast, Pedialyte podcast. Training camp is open, and now we are back. Hockey season has begun. Here with the Only Flyers podcast, Snow the Goalie. I'm Russ Joy at Joy on Broad, joined as always by two beautiful human beings. Of course, first in the middle, Anthony SanFilippo. Find him on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. And over on the other side, the man who lit up the room at Westchester University, and that, of course, is none other than Bundy. Chris Therien. Follow him on Twitter at CTherien6. Bundy, speaking engagements galore. How's that celebrity feeling over there, huh? How you doing?
Good, man. It was a good week. I got a chance to get out and, as I said, share a couple stories. I was out at Westchester University speaking, and the Delaware County Press Club this week, which I have a couple of really interesting stories of, which really off the cuff.
He was out our way. He was out my way.
That was definitely your way. Oh, yeah. I got some Anthony SanFilippo material today. Sometimes people are, you don't know these legends in certain parts, and I had to deal with.
Oh boy, Mr. Chuckles, giggly bits in the middle. Anthony SanFilippo. Find him on Twitter at SanPhilly. How you doing there, fella?
I didn't have any coffee yet this morning, and I probably need some because it was a late night last night. I was down at the ballpark for the Phils. I got home after midnight. And then we're up early here in what Bundy calls the mongrel hours, doing a live show, only because it's the only time today that we had available, mostly because of my schedule, that we had available. So it's I'm just running on adrenaline at this point, Russell. Running on adrenaline.
You know what? There's one thing that we can say, or that some people would say, and that's that you don't phone it in. You don't mail it in.
I certainly
Bundy
don't
doesn't mail it in.
No.
Yours truly.
Only one person does.
The king of mailing it in. By the way, we have people setting over-unders on the Bundy Bomb for today's episode. I want to remind people, if you're over on Twitter, which we managed to get back up and running here, or if you're on Facebook, you can comment down below by all means. If you want to head over to YouTube, you can join us there as well and comment. If you're watching on Twitter and you want to interact with the show, YouTube is probably the place to go. You can see it scrolling along the bottom of the screen, youtube.com/@SnowTheGoalie. And by the way, if you're watching right now on YouTube, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button. You know how much we like that. It helps us out. It helps other Flyers fans find us. And let's be honest, they need to find us because this somehow still, all these years later, remains the Only Flyers podcast. I don't know how it's still happening, but it is. So, okay. Flyers training camp is open. What? I've seen torts.
Did we talk about this? Didn't we talk about this?
What?
I just popped it up on the screen for you.
Snow the Goalie, come for the pre-show banter, stay for the podcast. Brent
Yes.
Boothman. Yes.
But you didn't tell the people who are listening
what?
only on the podcast that if they missed
They
the
know.
one.
I say this every week.
Go ahead. Continue. Oh, and this is, by the way, this is from the pre-show podcast.
Listeners.
This is from the pre-show podcast, the pre-show banter. But here we go. I just thought there was a couple nice items. Bundy was talking about the young college girls who listen to Snow The Goalie, and we have the older folks.
I never should have given you access to be able to pull these up because you're screwing up a thing that I was going to get to here in a couple minutes.
All right, guys, do what you got to do.
I'm
not going to have. I have zero access anymore. Take it away from me. I'm not pushing.
No. You get to keep your access because you're such a good old boy over there. Okay. Now, Bundy has to inform people about some things that have happened here in recent weeks. Now, if you were joining us on the YouTube stream, which of course is where you get the exclusive banter, where there's like anywhere from usually 6 to 10 minutes of nonsense before we get started with the show, you would have learned that Bundy recently did a speaking engagement at Westchester University, Westchester, the best Chester, my alma mater, where he was approached by 2 students. Bundy, really quick, give the Cliff Notes versions of that to the fine folks who go back and listen to this only in the podcast feed, even though they should head over to youtube.com/@SnowTheGoalie and subscribe and listen to the pre-show banter.
Yeah, it was actually kind of multi-layered because I had these 2 young fans, female fans of the show and the Flyers, came up after the presentation and they said, "Hey, Chris, you know what? We love Snow the Goalie, but our professor starts his class, so we're not able to get the pre-game, the pre-banter, pre-show banter." And I said, well, wow, like that's some of the best stuff. Like we heard all about it. So I said, well, you got to talk to your professor. Tell him he's going to start class 10 minutes later. So anyway, the best part is that, when you get people show up and then you really realize like, wow, people are just tuning in and it's a good variant. Like I love the fact that it's we have a very diverse listening audience, viewing audience. It's really, really cool. So yeah, we have definitely 2 female fans out at the Westchester University, probably more. It was a great night, and it was a really, really good opportunity, as I said, to share my story with a lot of the Westchester kids and the crowd and the law enforcement from from Chester County. And as I said earlier in the banner, Deb Ryan was a DA, and she was most responsible in the previous weeks for having her law enforcement track down that Cavalcante, the newest Eagles fan, and it was kind of interesting. It was just really cool, but we had some really good people in there doing a lot of good things, and it was a good night, and got to spread some good Flyers messaging. One thing that is pretty prevalent right now, you can tell there's an excitement and a buzz again about the season coming up from the fans. I think just a new regime turn has certainly gotten fans excited about what's to come, and I think I feel that when I go through a lot of the audiences. I have a lot of people ask me, even at the Delco Press Club, about Jonesy, Danny, getting an opportunity to kind of change the tide of things, from what they've been. So it's a kind of an exciting time right now. And with training camp having started the other day, I think it gets people, with the nice fall weather, it does feel like hockey starting, and that's pretty cool.
Hey, really quick, you mentioned the Delco thing that you did, and you mentioned that there's like certain levels of celebrity. At the risk of inflating Anthony's head like SpongeBob when he blew into those like fake muscles that he had, the blow up ones. Can you tell everybody about the interaction that you had with you mentioned college age kids, but then there was somebody who maybe is a little bit farther to the other end of the spectrum. Can you just give the fine folks a little tease?
Yeah, this is somebody that I don't like to guess ages, but may have been in their 80s, and just a delightful person. And I was at the Delaware Press Club. Is a lot of former writers for the Delaware County Times. A lot of them are authors. And so they asked me to come in for their inaugural event and speak at the State Street Pub the other day. In beautiful, it wasn't Devon. Anthony, I got a brain cramp. Media. So we had a great lunch, and I was able to again to speak. And I had a lady come up to me after, as I said, probably mid-80s, I'm going to guess. And she said, I used to work with Anthony, and Anthony SanFilippo is a Delco guy. And she says, I don't know if you know this, but Anthony is an incredible actor. And I'm looking like, all right, where are we going here? Like an actor? Like, I'm like, oh, and just want to be polite. And of course, listen to what she had to say. And she says, and his family are incredible actors. And I'm like, holy Jesus, like Anthony's he's like real, like Al Pacino, I guess. And anyway, she went on to rave about Anthony and his acting at the Swarthmore Theater Company or whatever. I think it was something like that.
Players Club of Swarthmore, yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, I was stunned. I've all the time I'd met Anthony, I'd known him a long time. I never knew he was an actor. But I'll tell you what, like in Delco, when it comes to acting, he's like the fucking Robert De Niro of Delco, man. That's our guy.
There it is, the first Bundy bomb of the episode, ladies and gentlemen. If you had the over-under set for around 9 minutes or so, or was that about 8? Let's see, that was what, 15, about 15:50. About 9 minutes into the show. Congratulations, you win a prize if you had the over. Not great today.
Ant, what an unbelievable story. I mean, I was like, and you know what? First of all, and I have to say this as a former athlete. I think to myself, like when I see different things like that or different passions of people, I immediately thought to myself, how cool is that? Like maybe it's my older sense, Andy or Anthony, where I'm getting to that point in life, but I was like, wow. Like there are people do different things and there's acting and people like to go curling in Canada. But really, Anthony, I thought that was just so cool that you do that and you got your family entwined in it. Everybody has something, right? Like I like doing sports. My girls play basketball and every family is different. So I think that's pretty cool. Take it away because I thought it was a great story.
It's really awesome that it's really awesome that she came up and said that. That was very nice of her. I haven't actually acted on stage in about 4 years. I've been directing more.
I was at that show.
Yeah, that's right.
That was the one in was that in Pottstown, right? Or
no,
somewhere,
it was in Berwyn.
Oh, that's right.
Berwyn. Yeah, that was
a good show.
Theater, Footlights.
I was impressed. You're clearly a better actor than a podcast host and a writer. I'll tell you why, it's good.
The funny thing about that show, and that was the play called Moon Over Buffalo, was the name of the play. Their lead actor, I wasn't involved with that show during rehearsals or anything like that. I didn't audition for it, nothing. Their lead actor had to drop out of the show 4 days before it opened because he had an injury. If you remember, Russ, I had to fall off the stage. My character was drunk and had to fall off the stage. And I guess in rehearsal, when he fell off the stage, he injured himself to the point where he could not go on. And so they called me because somebody there knew me and said, I don't know of anyone else who could come in and fill in and learn a lead role in 4 days. And so I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And so that was a last minute fill in. That was the last time I was actually on stage performing. It was right before the pandemic. But I've directed since and several times at the Players Club. My kids have all performed. And last year I directed a show. It was the first time all 4 of us were involved in a production at the same time. We've always just been, one of us or 2 of us. A couple times there's been 2 people involved, but it was the very first time all 4 of us were able to share the stage in one way or another, with the same show. So it's kind of a neat thing, and it's fun. And my oldest son was a baseball player. My youngest son played soccer. My daughter was a dancer. It's like there was all other things that we did. But it was kind of cool. So I appreciate that. That was nice. And I'm glad, Bundy, you got to see that and know that now. And so the next time I do something theatrical, I'm going to invite you so you can come out and see it.
I would love to, and I will be there. And I'll be doing backflips down the middle of the aisle.
You and Russ will be sitting there like the 2 puppets on the Muppet Show, right? Waldorf and Statler. Criticizing everything I did.
I think
that's what you guys would be.
Anthony's gonna be in like some dramatic role, and we'll be sitting up in the balcony. Bundy, it'll be like, I thought it was acting. It's good to be laughing again. It's good to be doing anything again. All right, let's get into today's previously scheduled activities as we talk about the start of Flyers training camp. Now, I know a lot of people are excited. I will tell you guys, and I don't say this just for fun, there are more people in my life right now who, when they talk about the Flyers season coming up And you know how this always works every year. Flyers, Sixers. They always get tied together. People pick their camps. There's not a ton of crossover. I find myself in that camp, but not as many people do, I guess. I have had more people say to me, I am more excited to see what the Flyers do than what the Sixers do this year. Now, that's partially insane because even though the Sixers have a terribly unbalanced roster, drama galore, and we all know they're going to go out in the second round, that's at least a team that you say, hey, there is a path potentially to making a deep playoff run. This Flyers team is not that. And yet, the positivity surrounding this team perhaps is due in part to the fact that the organization's been honest about the rebuild. What do you guys attribute, and I don't know if you're hearing the same thing that I am, but what are you guys attributing some of the positivity that people are going into this season with versus like what we've seen the last few years?
Bundy, I think it's very. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. You give your 2 words. So I think we're going to say the same thing.
All right, culture change, return to culture. That's all it is. That's all they've done is go back to what Snider was. There's no difference in what the team was the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, going in as an honest assessment, looking at the team, is this team have the talent to win? No, it does not. But that's okay because we've been told it's a rebuild. And it's supposed to be a rebuild. But the things that have come back are the same things that we've been preaching for 2 years, boys. Like exact same thing. It's been kind of a blueprint. And that's the part that we always said was you can't lose. Where I said last year, I think I even said it like on a national show, like you can be a shitty team, but you can never devolve into a shitty organization. And I don't think there's ever been a truer words that came off my tongue. And that's what was happening. So if installing somebody that was going to, throw the culture back at the fans of what once was, and then now we're going to tell you, hey, we're going to build the team on top of this, because you can't just win with legacy and memories and history of the good old days. You have to have that built-in legacy, which this team does, unlike any other in the city. I've seen it. I've watched all 4 teams. There's something about a Flyer passion that other teams don't have. And so that was the stuff that we talked about. And finally, the people that finally came in here understood that, realized it, and made those changes. That's all it is. Return to culture. And then now give them a chance to build a team where it all comes together again. A good team with the legacy of the past and everything that was built here in this city for, 55 years.
I think Bundy's spot on with this. And I'm going to make I'm going to harken back for you, Bundy, back to the very, very early days of your hockey career. This kind of reminds, it actually probably goes to just before you actually reached the NHL, but this kind of reminds me of where this team was when Lindros first got here, but they still sucked, right? I mean, it was kind of like there was an excitement. Obviously, the excitement then was about the player getting Eric Lindros, right? Who they thought was going to be this, a generational talent. I mean, he's Hall of Famer, right? But I mean, that was kind of the idea, and that it was building towards something that finally, started to come to be in that 95 lockout season. And I kind of think that that's where we're in that early Lindros phase. All right, there's some excitement about some players who aren't going to be on the team this year, but they're coming. Right, and Cutter Gauthier and Matvei Michkov. So there's excitement about those kinds of players, but you're gonna be excited to grow with this team because they have been transparent and honest and of going back to, having the culture of the Flyers past. There's no doubt this team's going to suck this year. They're going to be bad. Okay. And if they're better, if they're competitive, and they're in every game, and they just happen to lose some at the end, that's okay. All right. They're not going to, when I say they're going to suck in the sense that they're not going to win games. They're not going to suck like they sucked 2 years ago, where they would get down 2-0 and then the game would end up being 6-1. They're going to be in games. They're going to be competitive. They're going to play tough. That's the way Torts coaches his teams. He gets the players to play a certain way. They'll probably win a few games that you don't expect them to win. I think especially early in the season, and we'll get into that in a minute. But at the same time, they're likely going to be toward the bottom of the league in the standings come April. And that's okay. Like, I think that everybody's understanding of that and is willing to accept that now, because they basically come out and told you what the plan is publicly and how it's going to go. And in the process, we're returning back to doing things the way we used to do them under our former owner and our founder. And I think that's the main reason why the excitement is what it is.
Speaking of that former owner and the founder of the team, is now an appropriate time?
Did I tee that up for you, Bundy? I mean, Russ?
Is this an appropriate time to point out 2 years ago? All right. And I'll be very careful how I say it.
I'm looking forward, Russ. I'm looking forward. I'm not looking behind anymore.
That's right. So 2 years ago, we noted that the Flyers accounts didn't mention Ed Snider's birthday, which some people thought was stupid of us to bring up, although traditionally they had. And usually for like an owner who's as woven into the fabric of a team and an organization as Snider was, you would kind of expect something like that, like the Yankees would do with the George Steinbrenner, like the Raiders, I guess, probably still do with Al Davis, like the Cowboys inevitably will do whenever Jerry Jones, well, maybe he won't die. Maybe he'll just move his sentience into that AI robot thing they have, the hologram down at Cowboy Stadium. But 2 years ago, we brought it up. A lot of people were like, hey, you know what? That is right. That's kind of shitty that they didn't mention anything. They didn't mention it at the game. Like, there was nothing. And then there was other people who were like, well, this is stupid. You guys are just like a bunch of out-of-touch assholes. Like, blah, 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 blah. And it started a whole thing. And then we had like another Twitter beef. And it was like stupid. But it was true. And then last year, the team put out a thing on Twitter to acknowledge Ed Snider's birthday. And I'm pretty sure that at whatever the closest home game was to his birthday, they did a thing in arena to acknowledge it. Okay. Now, when that happened, we went, maybe perhaps bringing a little bit of light to it is part of what led to them, I don't know, acknowledging it last year. Well, friends, the Flyers put out their promotional schedule for this year, for this season. And one of the things that they are going to be celebrating this year is Ed Snider's birthday. There's a day on the promotional schedule for the owner's birthday. Now, you can go back in time if you want. You can relitigate this if you want. You can tell us that we are still just as stupid as we were 2 years ago. We are not, but you can try. If you thought that it meant nothing, you were wrong then and you would still be wrong now. Clearly, as this organization tries to gut and take out any semblance of the prior administration, the Dave Scott, Val Camillo era of Flyers, whatever you want to call it. I couldn't call it 2.0. I don't know what they were internally calling it. But if they have made an effort to cut that out and to go back to what this organization was before, this is about as bold of a statement. It's about as out in front as you can possibly be. When Hilferty was on our show a few weeks ago or a month and a half ago, he talked about how you don't try to replace an Ed Snider. You try to kind of uphold the legacy and do what you can. I mean, there might still be people who think this is stupid. There might be. But I think that for a lot of people who care about this team, care about the organization, who have been Flyers fans for their entire lives, they'll look at this and say, that's pretty cool and it's a nice gesture. And you've got like Andrew Fawcett here. Yay for Mr. Snider. HC, Mr. Snider smiling upon us. Now, I mean, I'm just saying, it's out there and, you know, there you go.
Yeah, I'll say something first and then I'll throw it to Bundy because, you know, it's a little bit different relationship that Bundy had with Ed than I had. I mean, I mostly dealt with him as a member of the media, although I did work for the man for 2 years. But Bundy had a little bit more of a personal relationship with him as his owner, as a player. So, but what I will say is the argument that we were making 2 years ago was not that, oh my God, they should be honoring this man all the time. Why aren't they honoring him? It was, here's a team that stinks, that has lost, there's losing fans left, right, and center, that the arena is emptying out all over the place, that's made one misstep after another. If you remember, that was right after the Hall of Fame inductions for Paul Holmgren and Rick Tocchet, when there was nobody in the building, right? I mean, there was all kinds of major faux pas that this organization was doing. And all we were suggesting was, hey, you would go a long way with these fans who you are losing if you just popped up on the screen at the first time out, remembering our founder on today, which would have been his, I forget what birthday it would have been, but whatever birthday it would have been. And, and just like a quick little 30-second video montage, whatever. Or on Twitter, if you could just put out hey, we're remembering our owner today. That's all it was. We weren't asking for like a big to-do. It was just a little recognition thing. And then your fans will sit there and go, oh, okay, I know the team stinks, but at least we recognize that at least they recognize where they came from. And that kind of gives us hope that they'll one day get back there again. And that's really all that we were suggesting. And it turned into this big kerfuffle. Ed's daughter, Serena, got involved. She started replying. I think she replied to you first, Bundy, on Twitter, and then she was replying to some of my stuff. And so that made it a big deal. And then it became like a story, like in the city, and they pushed back, and then we argued with them, and we ripped them for a couple episodes. And that really kind of became a thing. And so, like, to see where it was 2 years ago and where it is now, I mean, we didn't ask for this, for them to do a full day
a legacy game. They're calling it the legacy game against Calgary,
and that's
on his birthday. I think it's actually on his birthday. It's on January 6th.
Yep, it is on his birthday. Like, to see how far it's changed in 2 years. That's what we're talking about with the culture change. Like, this is we wouldn't have called for this, but this is how far the new regime is going to show everyone how important this is for the organization and for the fans to do something like this and recognize them. And that's all. And I think I'm glad that they've kind of figured that out. And that's part of what the new group is doing. Right, Bundy?
Donald Biordi, by the way, has a good comment here, Bundy, before you jump in. There are ways to evolve as an organization that don't involve throwing out everything that was good about the organization to begin with. It's like spot on.
And I just think like the one thing I knew was, and Anthony does, and there was just a connection to the team that Snider cared so much about for his fans. Like, I used to tell people, he loved his fans more than his players. And I think if you were a fan in his town, like, I mean, listen, in the world of sports that we live in today, there's so many hack owners out there that are in it for all the wrong reasons. Or to them, they're the right reasons, right? It's called money and finances. I mean, look, you got, Harris goes out and buys the Sixers, but he's got the Washington team and the Devils. I mean, there's no passion tied to Philadelphia for those reasons. When I look at that, I just look at him as an owner of a multifaceted sports entertainment machine in multi-cities. You can say there's passion to it, but one thing Ed Snider had was the passion for the fans, and he loved his fans, and he appreciated his fans. And so, people can say, oh, haven't won it all the time. It doesn't matter. They tried to win. And as I said before, one team wins the Stanley Cup, every year out of the 32 teams. That didn't matter, but what did matter was the culture and what the team means to the city. Unlike all the other towns, it embodied the blue collar attitude of the worker in the city, battling, fighting through things, making things uncomfortable in a sports setting. And you'll never see that again, the way the Broad Street Bullies were constructed. But even beyond the Broad Street Bullies, there's a great legacy here that was left. In the 80s, the teams were great. With 90s, there was always an excitement every single night. And then, the 2000s was pretty good. It was good in the early 2000s, and then we got the surprise again in 2010. But I just think people ultimately want to watch good hockey, reverberate a little bit back to the past. It doesn't have to be all about the past, and nor should it be. But I think there has to be some tribute and legacy of a reminder. And I remember talking to Hilferty about that, Anthony, how much he talked about the importance of honoring the history, because somebody built this. Somebody built this for this city, and it's been such a huge part of the culture of this town that you can't lose that in the process. And I think that's what's become important. I guess to Jonesy, I mean, I don't think Jonesy listened, but certainly the things that we've talked about were also as important to the people that are there making the decisions now. And they've kind of echoed what we did talk about 2 years ago.
Yeah. And just the last thing on that is that I think that we find in sports, not just in hockey or just with the Flyers, whatever, but I think we find in sports that we tend to like owners who are individual owners who are, involved, who are out there amongst the people. Like, think about what
Snider, Al Davis.
well, I mean,
Yep.
yeah, but even now, like, I mean, you look at the Phillies and you look at Middleton, he's out there shaking hands with the fans and inviting fans up into his box every game, right? I mean, like, things like that, where you are an individual who is relatable to the community and relatable to the people. Fans pine for that. They love that, because then they feel invested, more invested, because they know the owner is invested, not just with his dollars, but with his passion and his emotion. And when you have an owner like Joshua Harris or Harris Blitzer Entertainment, and they're owning teams all over the country, and due to spending more time down in Washington right now, glad handing with the Commanders fans, and and hasn't spoken one word or one iota about the mess it is the Sixers, and the whole argument with should they build an arena, not build an arena, hasn't even weighed in on it. Like, that's an owner who's disconnected. And it was what we used to complain about with the Flyers with Dave Scott, who was the representative of ownership, who was disconnected with the Flyers. And we're saying this is why it's different, because you're not connected. You don't have to be Ed Snider. You just have to have some traits that are similar. And I think people will accept that. Dan Hilferty is not going to be Ed Snider, but he has enough similar traits that people will relate to him on that level. He'll be there meeting people in the front as they walk into the building. Apparently there was a season ticket holder event, and Dan was there shaking hands with all the season ticket holders coming in, thanking them for being season ticket holders. Like, that never happened for the last 6 years, 7 years. He was, the owner, representative ownership was not there. And so that's all that fans want out of their owners. And I think that there's less and less of it in sports, and in general. And because it's too corporate, right? But in the instances where it's not, where it's an individual who cares about the fan bases, though, you'll find that those fan bases are more bought into whatever their team is doing, no matter how good or how bad they are, because they trust and believe in their owner.
There's also, but hold on, Russ, 1 sec. That's why the anger and the disdain raged through the fan base here. Because they'd seen that other side of it, they loved it. They felt like the family ties to this organization. Listen, when new regime came in, and we know we're talking about Dave and Valerie, people sometimes want to put their stamp on things that just don't need to be stamped. I'll give you the best example: the Flyer logo. Right? That was a change. Was it Coke to Pepsi or Pepsi to Coke? I can't remember the other one. Like, just doing things to be different. Sometimes just leave it alone. Again, a lot of that stuff is a revert to the past, but that's why the fans were so pissed, because they'd seen the other side and they saw something that was a complete flip over. They flipped it almost overnight. And you can't do that to a rabid fan base that has had, was married to the culture of this team and the legacy of the team. And when you did what you did last year, and for years before that, it will catch up to you as an organization. And that's why we talked about the corporations. I really feel with Dan in there now, Hilferty, he is absolutely carries a lot of the mantle that Snider had. And he understands sports in this town and understands the passion of the fans. And that you never undermine that layer of thinking, because the fans are the ones that make your team valid at the end of the day. Good players by your organization, but the fans getting behind you. And that had not happened. And that's where they're trying to get back now to.
So much of this is just being able to identify and have a little bit of self-awareness. And prior ownership, prior front-facing people who were in important roles had little to none of it. Hilferty has it. Jones has it because he's been involved with the organization before. Briere has it because he's been involved with the organization before. They understand it. If there's anybody that you can think or that you would hope or trust is going to be able to, like, I guess, live up to the legacy, or at least, maintain some feeling of what the Flyers way always was, like, it would be these guys. Again, there might be people who are listening to the show right now who are screaming at their phones or screaming at their devices saying, like, hey, the Flyers haven't won a Stanley Cup since the 70s. The Flyers way sucks. I mean, you can certainly go about that way if you want. And, like, you're not wrong. Like, the team hasn't had a ton of success. It's had some, like, decent runs here and there. It's certainly not – and, like, this may be where I go, hey, the Flyers are a a franchise that matters to the NHL, but they're not a winning franchise yet. There's a lot of bad seasons that have happened in recent memory. And part of what this team has to do is figure out a way to instill the values and create the culture that's going to make this a long-lasting winning team. And so now, 40 minutes into the show, we finally get to training camp is open. And there is a lot of enthusiasm around the team. Sean Couturier is back on the ice. Cam Atkinson's back on the ice. It looks like, for the most part, they've got a healthy squad. They have players that are excited, presumably, to be here. Stahl is excited to be here. Tortorella had, he had a rope out at camp. Everybody's excited. And I guess, right now, what is the thing that you think people should be looking for right now that they could be excited about and that they should be looking for? We had somebody in the comments a little bit ago, and let me see if I can pull this up really quick.
We've had a lot of
John
great comments
John Haverman. John Haverman over on Facebook says, heading up to training camp today with his son. So, what should John and his son be looking for at camp today?
You just want to watch. I always think that training camp is really more, and Bundy can confirm this, but training camp is really only about conditioning, right? So ultimately, they already know who's going to be on this roster and who's going to be there. Maybe there's one battle between a couple guys, and they're thinking, maybe this guy, maybe that guy. But for the most part, you already know what you're going to do, right? So when you're a fan and you're going to training camp, I think what you really want to do is you want to look at especially these early days of training camp when everybody's together. You just want to see how the younger players compete with the veterans in camp. And I just mean that in drills. I mean, it might seem mundane, right? Like if you're going to camp and like, well, what the heck am I looking for? All right, watch some of the drills and see how young players compete against veteran guys. And you'll see sometimes they look foolish because the veteran guys know how to do things a different way than the rookies do. But then there's sometimes where the young players and the rookie players actually do a good job in those little competitions, those little board battles, one-on-ones and things. And you go, man, that's encouraging. You can't take anything more out of it. You can't sit there and go, oh man, he looked fantastic, this guy should be in the lineup. No, but I mean, there should be things that you find watching these guys play that make it encouraging for you and to think about what's coming down the road. So I think when you're a fan attending camp, that's really all you can look for. I mean, there's really not much else. But man, like yesterday, Bundy, did you ever have, and I know Hitch was a pain in the ass like this, but did you ever have to bag skate like Torts made these guys bag skate yesterday? I mean, that was some kind of thing. I mean, Scott Lawton was ready to throw up. He said it in the press conference afterwards.
I've been through some that are as bad as anything you'll ever imagine. I mean, there's nobody. The worst. I mean, you could say it was bad, and I'm sure it was awful. But whatever it was yesterday, yes, I've been through that. It's just the worst when you know it's coming to, and you lost a couple, and then you hear the coach like, well, you kind of have an idea when practice is winding down, and you hear like, all right, puck's in the net, and you're like, oh no, here we go. I know it's coming. Line up on the blue line, 2 groups, and the worst was the mountain. We used to call it the mountain. So you'd go, so it's, you're starting the goal line. You go goal line, blue line, red line, blue line, far goal line. So we go short, near side, blue line, and back twice to the goal line. The next group would go, then red line, back twice. And then the next group would go. So 2 groups. It would be better if 3 went, but no, when you're really bad, you get 2 groups. And then the far blue line and back twice. And then all the way down, and then you build it back and you go twice. It was it was sickening. It was like it was awful. In the NHL, we did that.
Yeah, and I just wonder, I mean, I'm not no knock, Bundy, but I mean, I think you guys were you were probably at the era where training 24/7, 365 was just kind of becoming a thing, right? I mean, you guys,
just
right.
Started,
I mean,
yeah.
But guys just before you, they would come into camp, and camp was how they got into shape because they hadn't done shit all summer long, right?
Yeah.
These guys are 24/7, 365 athletes and are getting exhausted doing these kinds of things. And so that's why I say it's so difficult for them. But I mean, but good on Torts for getting these guys to do that. And I say that because, I mentioned earlier, I think this team's going to win a few games you probably don't expect them to. I think just like last year, they're going to get off to an okay start. And it's probably because they're better conditioned than a lot of other teams are, just because he's an old school coach that way. And they might snake a couple of teams like that you don't expect them to beat early in the season, but then eventually it will catch up to them. But I think that we looked at it last year. If you remember, Bundy, we almost
don't make the official predictions yet. All right,
no, not yet.
It was
but
spot on. It was spot on last year. We got to be very careful. We have a lot to live up to this year.
Or 2 months, whatever it was. We nailed their schedule and nailed their record, and surprised people. And but then it fell off at the end. And as expected, I think you're going to see a lot of the same thing this year with this team.
Yeah, and again, a lot of it I won't make predictions. We'll save that as we move into the future. But a lot of the things will depend also on the injury situation, right? Like as you go into it, you see Couturier back and Atkinson, and there's still questions. The one thing you get from the team is that we're going to work. We're going to really work. And like I thought they worked last year. Like I thought Tortorella had them working really good last year for what they had. And our thing last year was we thought Torts probably got them more wins than they needed, right? If they could have had maybe an opportunity to floor out and bottom out for a guy like Bedard and at least get in that conversation. And again, I think there'll be it'll be similar in a lot of ways this year. This team will work with the coach. Do guys take another step this year? Like in terms of a Cates, Noah Cates, does he go another level up? Is Konechny, can he maintain what he did? Because we only saw it really that 1 year where you saw kind of a stardom jump out at him. There's a lot of questions. Will the defense hold together? Is Sanheim going to be able to take a step forward, like in terms of anchoring things? So there are a lot of questions, but the one constant with the group will be that they are going to work. Jonesy told me that, hey, that's going to be the theme that we're going to have going into the year. We're going to work, and we're going to be a hard team to play against. They were that last year too, and that's going to be the theme for a couple of years until they start, getting more talent in and plugging those into the lineup. So, but right now, again, it's still a time to get young guys under and show who this team is with the coach. Guys will get an opportunity to play in training camp. And when I look at guys too, you're just talking about guys getting bag skated and who's in camp. The one thing that's always interesting when you look at players, there's usually guys now that 4 or 5 guys at the same position that are all the same. They all kind of have the same level of skill. They all do kind of the same things, and it's like a cookie cutter in a lot of ways. But what will separate a lot of those young guys, and that's what I'm looking for, is what separates their level of competitiveness between those guys that are vying for the same position. You could have a kid maybe going back to junior. You might have a 22-year-old in camp that you don't know, that you're trying to figure out who they are. But to me, those measurables are the level of competitiveness that player has. And there's a lot of guys that are just the same player now. The way the mold is, you're going to get exceptional talent like McDavid and players that do carry the mantle, the high-level talent. But most of the league is not like that. Most of the league is comprised of guys that are going to be depth guys, going to get you ugly goals, score ugly goals. And then you're going to, rebuild and you have your good players with your top line guys. And that's where the Flyers are still trying to fit all those pieces together right now.
Hey, Bundy, somebody asked, Zach Weeks over on YouTube asked, do the bag skates like this really bring guys together? I remember wrestling conditioning, and I don't know it brought us together, but it's good to know who's all in.
It doesn't bring anybody together. It just makes you want to throw up. But afterwards, it's kind of good in the locker room where everybody's kind of feeling like crap together and you're all sitting there hanging out and, you did the work together. Does it bring it together? No, but it does unite you in a sense that, hey, we just worked really hard and everybody was in the same boat together. So from that standpoint, yeah, there is a unity to that. But in terms of it together on the ice, no, you're just trying to get through it. And by the time you get to the last one, it doesn't really even matter what spot you're coming in. You're just trying to finish at that point. But there's some bag skates, yes, that are worse than others. And I've been through every one of them. None of them are fun.
Yeah, I guess the unity thing, Bundy, is, you would normally, if you can have a practice where a couple guys kind of just skate through it, whether they're having a bad morning or whatever the case might be, and they just kind of meander through the practice and can try and hide themselves a little bit. When you have a bag skate, nobody's hiding.
You can't.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. And so I think that's the unity thing. It's like, look, we all had to go through this together. Let's make sure we don't get another one. Yeah, we know we're getting in and start a training camp. When it happens in season, it sucks. Let's not have it happen again in season. I think that's the unity thing there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is, and it does, and it shows you who's working and if someone's slacking off or something. So, even the guy that finishes last, like sometimes in the group, if not the fastest skater or someone just completely tanked at the end of practice, you still know if the guy's working or not. Nobody cares what place you come in if you're putting the work in. That's the one thing in hockey. Like, I don't know what they do, and I don't know, do NBA. I'd be shocked if those guys do like those Wendy's where they go back. I can't imagine if they
maybe in camp, but I guarantee you it doesn't happen in the regular season.
Yeah, and you're gonna have different teams with different levels of guys. Like in terms of where your team's at. Like, I doubt on the first day of training camp in Vegas, I may be wrong, that they're probably running the veterans through the gamut of a bag skate. Like, you come off a Stanley Cup just 3 months ago, and those are probably a little bit different attitudes that different coaches have and stuff. So, but I do like the work. I like the fact that the team's trying to embody that culture again. And I thought they did that last year, to be honest with you. I thought Torts had them playing hard the entire year. I just don't think that was necessarily the right thing to do. I wanted them playing hard. I just wanted them to have a little bit more of a chance to get that top pick. And that's what we said. Torts was gonna make sure guys were accountable and playing hard. And as we said, they're probably 7 games better than maybe the record was because of good coaching, guys stepping up at times. And that'll be something to look at again this year, where the young guys go another year past last year. Do they advance? And I think there will be. There's some guys, exciting guys that I'm looking forward to seeing and taking the next step. Certainly, Cates and Morgan Frost will be other ones. Frost had a good finish to the year. I've been a Morgan Frost believer, and I do think that kid can put up points in this league. I'd like to see it happen a lot again this year and see what happens with that. So there's a lot of exciting things to look at this year.
Hey guys, really quick, you mentioned the top pick, and we'd be remiss if we didn't note the fact that, as we predicted on the show, Matvei Michkov was loaned out from SKA. He ended up getting loaned out to Sochi. There was a rumor that he had wanted to go elsewhere, but he ended up back with Sochi.
Yeah, I think what we had said, just to clarify that, what we had said last time we talked about this, I don't know if it was last episode or 2 episodes ago, whatever it was that he really liked Sochi, but there was a concern that he didn't necessarily wouldn't go back there because that's where his dad died. Yep. So, but ultimately he really liked it there. I mean, that was a place he was happy playing. Yep. And so the fact that he went back there, that's good for him.
The reason I bring it up is because, as we talked about going into the season, you want to do the occasional check-in and see how things are going. And in a game, was it yesterday? Or was it 2 days ago? Mm-hmm. He scored 2 goals. I think it was yesterday. He scored 2 goals. First goal tied the game at 2 apiece. And then, with less than a minute remaining in the game, he scored the game winner to give Sochi the 4-3 win. The first goal was just byproduct of being around the net. Goalie's out of position. He went top shelf. Second goal, considerable skill, a nice shot. So if you're looking for excitement, if you're looking for a down the pipe thing, obviously everybody's going to be keeping their eyes on Michkov. We don't know how long it's going to take until he's here, but seeing him perform at the KHL level is encouraging. I did see, and this is just really quick, I don't think a lot of people understand how European sports work with loaning players out to other teams, and why they do that. There was a seeming complaint that was being levied by some people on Flyers Twitter that he wasn't playing for SKA and that him moving to another team was a waste of time, or that it was a show that they'd given up on him, or that it was going to be worse for him to not be with that team. And if you follow soccer in any way, you'll know this is a very common practice. You take a young player who isn't going to crack the team for whatever reason, and you loan them out to a lower team in that same league to get starters minutes, to get legitimate playing time. It happens all the time. It happens with American talent in soccer quite a bit, actually. It's a normal thing. And ultimately, it's like, would you rather have him play at the KHL level and get significant minutes for a team that might not be as good? Or would you rather have him rotating in and out of the lineup, playing, 4 or 5 minutes a night just so he could play for SKA? So this is seemingly a more advantageous position for him to be in, gives him the chance to get more minutes, for him to get time playing at that level. And so there's your Michkov minute for this week. It was more than a minute, but encouraging signs.
It is encouraging signs. One thing I do want to get to, Russ, I don't know if we didn't really talk about this today before the show, but I saw a couple people ask about it earlier, and I did want to. I don't know if you were planning on getting to this, and and I don't want to pop anything up on the screen because
Go ahead, Ant. It's okay.
If I do, you'll be like, oh, you got it. Yes, there you go. Zach Pinto. I figured I'd give the latest on this. I'm sorry, Shane Pinto. I said Zach Pinto. Shane Pinto. I don't know why I said Zach Pinto.
I thought they were talking about the car you used to drive in your 20s.
Yeah, no, Shane Pinto. I really just dawned on me. I was like, why did I say Zach? Anyway,
I thought that was the car that you drove in your 20s.
Yeah. Do you remember those things blowing up, Bundy?
Yeah, I don't know how many. We had a Gremlin, and I think that thing looked like it was good, like the AMC Gremlin, and I was like a kid, or I had a Pinto, and my dad did. And I was like, fuck, I got
Gremlin's what the girls
called
Ant in high school.
Your parents would be smoking in the Pinto, going to hockey practice with the windows up. You'd be in the back like this.
Yeah, no, well, Pintos, I think if I remember correctly, were cars that had contact, that what they would basically explode on contact. Like if you got into an accident in a Pinto, it would explode. Like they were something malfunctioning in them for a while. So I do remember that. But anyway, back to the real conversation here. Yeah, Shane Pinto. So as I had put out last Friday, I told fans, keep an eye on the Shane Pinto situation. If he couldn't sign with Ottawa, the Flyers would be interested. They were one of a few teams that were interested. I know Boston was also interested. I think there was a third team, although I'm not 100% sure who that was. But I talked to people both with the Flyers and up in Ottawa as well. So this is not just like a one-sided thing. But the Flyers were interested. Over the weekend and then into the beginning of the week, right before camp started, it sounds like, from what I'm hearing up in Ottawa, that they're going to re-sign him and he's going to end up going there, but he hasn't done it yet. And so, well, what's the Flyers' involvement here? Maybe nothing, but they can't sign Pinto right now because they don't have the cap space to sign him, and so they need to get rid of some salary. The name that keeps coming up is Matthew Joseph, who's got $2.9 million remaining on his AAV on his contract for each of the next 3 seasons, including this year. And so that's the contract that everybody keeps. I've heard from up in Ottawa. I've heard from the Flyers. So like that's the name. And the Flyers are willing to take on. They've told the Senators, "We'll help. We'll facilitate. We'll take a contract, but you got to pay for it." And so the question is, what do the Flyers want in return? And while I've heard a name of a player, I don't want to say it because if it doesn't happen, this was like the same thing when we had with Massimo Rizzo, right?
Yeah.
Like I knew who it was. And when it's a young player or a prospect, you don't want to start putting names out there. And then it doesn't happen. And then that player is a kid and he's thinking, oh my God, the team doesn't want me anymore, whatever. So we try not to, a lot of times we hear these things. And so we try not to put them out until we know it's going to happen. Okay. So, but there is a player that the Flyers are interested in that is in the Ottawa system. And Ottawa, from what I'm told up in Ottawa, is they would prefer to find a way to move this contract with only trading away a draft pick, whether that's a 3rd round pick, a 2nd round pick, whatever it might be. That's their preference. However, if there's no way that they can get that done, if teams are not willing to accept that contract with just a draft pick, then maybe they would be willing to go the next step and include a player or prospect. And the one that they are most likely to move is the one that the Flyers are interested in. So that's where things are.
Is that though? So it sounds though like if just from where Ottawa's at, that this is a guy that they probably have given up on.
Well, I don't necessarily know if they've given up on him because they prefer to give up the draft pick, right? I mean, so if you'd rather give up a draft pick, you're saying we don't want to give up the player if we don't have to.
I'm just trying to, and again, I have an idea who it might be. I'm just saying is that if it's a young guy And I'm just assuming it's a young guy based on
it is a prospect. I could say that much without.
So it's probably somebody that Ottawa doesn't feel is
living
develop the way that they thought he was going to develop.
Right. So that's kind of where things are.
You take a flyer on him. Maybe he's got some term left, and then you could take a shot at him for a year or two and see if you can salvage the project.
Yeah, and so I think what I know is that the Senators have not gotten back to the Flyers in the last few days, unless they talked to them this morning while we're recording, which is a possibility. But as of yesterday, they had not gotten back to the Flyers in a few days, so they're kind of hemming and hawing up there. Now, I know that they just sold the team in Ottawa yesterday. That sale went through, so maybe that's part of it. Maybe they had to wait for that to come to fruition because there's a new owner and the money is somebody else's money, right? I mean, so maybe that's part of what's going on here. So yeah, I mean, I do think that there is still a possibility that the Flyers are involved in a deal, but it's most likely not going to be for Shane Pinto at this point, but they could still be in the mix with the Senators and potentially getting somebody else. And I know that I want to pop this up here, Russ, because this keeps coming up. There's no way they can afford him. And I wonder I don't know if he's suggesting that it's the Senators can't afford Pinto or the Flyers can't afford Joseph with $2.9 million. And because there's a lot of people who think the Flyers can't fit that under the cap. And currently if you look at the Flyers salary cap spot, or salary cap situation, you can't just add another $2.9 million. But there are so many loopholes around the beginning of a season and how to make it work. The Flyers have a number of players who they can technically make a paper transaction and send to the AHL, right, without having to go through waivers, a bunch of young guys, and clear enough money that for one day Ryan Ellis's contract can stay on the books. And then in day 2, you put Ryan Ellis on LTIR. It frees up that $5.5 or whatever $1 million. And then you bring all those young kids right back in. They never really left. It was just a paper transaction. And that's how you get cap compliant day 1. And then day 2, you bring everybody back and everything works. So that's how it would work. So there's no, when people keep saying that the Flyers can't take on that contract, they absolutely can take on that contract. There's not a question that they can take it on. And there's also the possibility, don't forget that, I mean, part of a deal could be, hey, Ottawa, we're going to save you some money, but maybe not $3 million. We're going to trade you something back. That's maybe a little bit of a contract. And that, because I think that when they were offering for Pinto, there was probably a player with an NHL contract that was going to go back to Ottawa as well. Again, don't want to mention names because I was asked not to, but there was certainly something there. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen now anyway. So it'll be one of those trades that you always will down the road we'll talk about and say, oh, I wonder what would have happened if they did that deal. But yeah. So I mean, so there are other ways around it. Let's just put it. I just want to say it that way. So yeah, they can make it happen. And I still say it's probably in that 50-50 range at this point, maybe slightly less of a chance. Depends on how Ottawa plays it out on their end. But the Flyers are still interested in helping them out. Whether or not it comes to fruition, we'll see.
That was a lot. That was a lot to take in.
I wanted to throw it out there for everybody.
Here's what's going to be interesting about the Flyers, right? They are going to be able, in a lot of ways, to absorb some cap. And you would think that over the next couple of years, that's where things are going to get very interesting for them as a team, as being a facilitator to move contracts that other teams don't want in the short term in exchange for assets, because, again, you're trying to rebuild. So not a bad thing. Anything else you guys wanted to get to before we head out today?
I hear that there's going to be an announcement coming soon. I know everybody's been asking us about the broadcast. Like for weeks, we had known that Brian Boucher was going to be the guy. We were told, we don't want to put that out there, right? Just let it come to fruition. I think that there was a reason that they wanted to get the TNT announcement out first. They're probably because he's doing TNT as well. So it's like we had known for a long time. But we couldn't really say anything. And we kind of, I'll be honest, guys, we kind of dodged those questions anytime we saw them in here or on Twitter, because we really didn't want to we didn't want to say anything. It wasn't our place to put it out there, and we had, kind of agreed not to. I will say that I hear that there's going to be an announcement for radio as well. It's coming soon. Not our place to break the news, but because it's not an important thing. Like if this was involving, I'll put it this way. I say this to me all the time. If you know information, why don't you put it out? You're a journalist. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes there is a give and take, right? Where you get more information when you protect information as well. That's just kind of the game we have to play sometimes, and it sucks sometimes because you sit on something and you're like, God, I've known about this and I can't say anything, and then somebody else reports it and you're like, damn it, I could have had that, but I didn't. But it is, and Scott is right. It is a professional courtesy that he just mentioned that. But so there are things that you can say and things that you can't. And so the fact that we're not putting it out there and letting the team announce it, we'll let the team announce it, and then we'll talk about it probably next week. That is a courtesy to them, and then that's why I'm able to get the information that I get. I think sometimes because I'm able to, when I'm asked not to say something, I don't. And
the only thing I've ever broken, and I hate breaking stories, was I had a feeling the day that Jonesy got the president's job. I threw that out there. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if it wasn't me, it was going to be some guy in his mother's basement in Montreal that was going to do it 2 minutes later. And I figured, you know what? Like, I know the Flyers wanted to hold on to that and make the announcement, but I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to let this happen. Like, if it's not someone like me who's been with them for 25 years or broadcasted with them, I'm sure the hell not going to let, somebody in their, seriously, in their basement getting the rumors and then putting it out there. And that was just kind of the exception to the rule. But I totally get what Anthony does and respects it as a reporter. We get a lot of great stuff, and we do share it with you guys.
Yeah.
But some of it we can't, because then you break the process of what the team's trying to do.
You break the trust that you have with people.
Yeah, and then they can't do the job, and then that falls on us. That becomes our fault for the misinformation campaign or the information campaign that the team can't do it anymore because they got thrown in a bad spot. So I think people understand that.
Well, the other element to this, by the way, is that it's not worth burning a bridge over this story. Like, this is not a mega story that you don't care if you burn the bridge over. This is it's whatever, it's a thing.
Right.
So I do think that Bundy started dropping some tidbits about things last week, even though I said that we shouldn't drop tidbits about things, but Bundy got himself excited. And I will say, and by the way, Scott is totally right. All Ant's fault. Right. I think that there are going to be some. There are more than one announcement coming from some entity at some point.
Look at you teasing our fans, you.
And so that's it. I'm just gonna say there's an announcement coming on this radio thing, but I don't know. I don't know who's to say. I've just listen. My ear's been to the ground. You know how this is. We cover in some way the media stuff a little bit more than other places might. Anthony's Captain J journalist over there. I like to be in the mud, so there's definitely some moving and shaking going on, and I think people are going to be very interested to see some things coming out over the next few weeks. I'll add on.
There is
that,
something coming out today about the radio, I believe.
Oh, it's today.
It is.
Okay.
It's today. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's not me. I didn't say that. I'm not saying anything.
Okay. It's today.
You're definitely not on a live broadcast. You're definitely not on a live broadcast. There will be an announcement
today, from what I'm understanding, that something will be announced today.
Yeah, I was told it was going to be this week at some point. It hasn't happened yet, so that's why I said coming soon. I didn't know if there was a delay on that or whatever. But
what did you want to add on there, Anthony?
All I wanted to add is that when you say there's going to be something else bigger or something other, I shouldn't say bigger.
You said bigger. I didn't say bigger.
You've said bigger in the past.
I said another
you may
thing.
have said it in the past. Another thing coming, whatever. I will say that we probably are looking to be talking about that not next week's episode, but the week after's episode. And it's a positive. It's not anything that, because I don't want anybody sitting there going, "Oh, you guys know that the Team Canada report's coming." No, we have no idea. And Danny addressed.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah,
Danny addressed that.
Canada.
Right. It's the Danny addressed that during his press conference the other day. He said even the same thing. He was expecting to have heard about it by now. I mean, Danny was as honest as can be about that. It was maybe the best answer anyone's given about the Hockey Canada situation. Like, he's like, I don't know when it's coming. We haven't been told. I kind of thought it would be announced by now. Like, I mean, he is saying the same thing that we're all saying. Like, just Jesus.
But if there's no legal jeopardy, how can they put the stuff out, right? Like, if there's nothing, so if there's no police, maybe I'm wrong, Anthony. I don't know, maybe you can explain to Bender's reporter, but if there's no information, if no one's been charged, isn't it against those people's violations of rights to have this material put out there without an actual legal charge? I don't understand the whole processing, and I mean, listen, guys, to be fair to everybody, we've been talking about this shit for months. Like, every week there's something about it. I'm getting to a point where it's getting fucking old, to be honest with you, and I feel terrible about the whole situation.
Well, that's why the NHL is, to me,
ham and egging this thing forever is ridiculous. Either shit or get off the pot, whoever's involved. Yeah, because you're making people talk about stuff that's not there right now, and there isn't anything there. Like, even Danny, I don't know what's going on.
This is what happens when lawyers and upon lawyers upon lawyers upon lawyers get involved, because you're talking dozens of lawyers now at this point is what it really has become. And so you're right, Bundy. I mean, there is certainly a situation where, you know, it's the league should be looked at negatively. The police up in Canada are dragging their feet. Like, the fact of the matter is that it's been out there for over 2 years, and no one has said anything publicly other than that one report that really kind of came out in the Toronto paper that I'm forgetting, Globe and Mail, and that was really, really it. Other than that, like, you really haven't gotten a full in-depth reporting of anything, and it's all because everyone's afraid of being sued. It sucks. It totally sucks, but that's not what we were talking about. I didn't want to bring it up. Like, I just wanted to, the only thing I wanted to say was the thing that we're going to talk about probably in 2 weeks is much more positive, much more fun, much more exciting, and not that. I didn't want people to think that's what we're waiting. They're waiting for.
And you know what, guys?
And by the way, hold on. Let's take this to another place really quick. And it's someplace that Bundy and I were last week. We talked about Babcock and about what a weird situation it was. And now here we are a week later, and Babcock is fired. Well, sorry, he resigned. Were you guys surprised that this played out the way that it did? I wasn't, but
no, in today's day and age, I'm not surprised in the least.
Just, I mean, again, but the part that still nobody gets is like what really went on. Like, there's people like the Gaudreau or the other people like, oh, you just want to share family photos. And then there's other people saying how wrong it was. Again, like, what really happened? Did he come in and say, I want to see your pictures. I want to see what kind of a character person you are, which is what we heard. Or did he say, hey, and here's a little picture of my son canoeing this summer. Can I see a little picture of your little Johnny out, water skiing? There's a difference between the two. But if I'll tell you one thing, if I'm a coach, I want you to go out and play your balls off on the ice. I don't give a fuck what you did in the summer except get in shape. All right? That's it. That's it. I've talked to NHL coaches, 3 of them, that just think this whole thing is just weird. Like, nobody does stuff like that at the bottom line. You're there to coach the team. Coach the team. I even said on Twitter this week, you know what? I guess I've come a long way in my life where I'm at now. But if you can make a difference in someone's life, even a kid, by doing the right thing, you might even impact them that way beyond just the coaching of hockey. So I don't know, Anthony. I thought it was just odd, the whole thing. But I wish I knew more of it, because it looked like there was some defense of it. But then there was other guys like, no, this is just wrong. Like Marty Walsh, the NHL director, said, yeah, this was the only appropriate course of action. So
I do have,
it's funny because, like, I was thinking about it, and I was saying, I wonder if, like, if a coach came to me and said, let me see your phone and see the photos on your phone. And I was like, I kind of scrolled through it. I'm actually doing it again right now. And it's like, it's a bunch of pictures of me and my family, my kids, maybe a couple of, no, yeah, right. No, a couple of, like, hey, did you see this kind of, like, this thing on Twitter or this thing on, like, and it's like a screenshot or whatever that I send around to people. And then there's always, just goofy, just typical goofy dad stuff. Like it's like what would you get out of that? Like I don't know. If you're looking at I'm scrolling through. I'm like if somebody looked at these photos and there's a couple theater pictures, right? There's me in a pink suit. Like that would be kind of fun, right? I mean, like what else is there?
You're Anthony SanFilippo. I mean, you're going to have those pictures. If you're some 22-year-old kid, who knows what's on that phone, right?
That's true.
So, I got pictures of my son at football and all that stuff too. But, I'm also not 22 living in this crazy social media world where memes and pictures fly through it like crazy.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
It is interesting to me, and this can be the last thing. I don't know how many of the old school coaches are really left in the league that could have gotten themselves embroiled in something like this. The first thought I honestly had was like, Torts is like a dying breed. Like there aren't many coaches like him. And when you see what was happening at training camp, just like him and like really breaking these guys in on the first day of camp, you go, man, there's a lot to process. And yet there has never been, to my knowledge, at least since he's been with the Flyers, there have been no complaints from players that go, anywhere beyond like what's happening on the ice. Babcock did such an overreach here where like you think of like similar kind of like hard ass, approach to the game or whatever. Babcock's, I don't know. The funny and maybe sad thing is, imagine a world in which Babcock really did have the right intentions, and this is the first time that he's ever opened up in a way to try to like get his players to feel a sense of community or family or whatever. And it's ultimately his downfall. That's kind of crazy. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't expect John Tortorella to ask guys to submit pictures of their families for next year's training camp. So, we can finish it there. Anything else that you guys want to get to? There is a rumor going around, Ant. I don't know if you looked in the private chat or not, if you want to touch on it or not. Or if we just don't want to.
I saw what you put in the private chat. Has that officially been reported?
It was put out there by someone else.
Okay, well, it's accurate.
So I don't know if you want to touch on it or not. We don't.
No, we'll let the team make the announcement.
Okay, the team can announce things. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think that's it for this week. We will be back next week. We'll probably have a little bit of news. We'll have some stuff to talk about next week. And then perhaps the following week, we'll have some news and some things to talk about. And then the week after, it's just going to keep going. All right. There's news everywhere, my friends. Thank you for joining us. And guys, I have to tell you, it was fun to get the three of us back together. Ant, lovely having you in the middle, as always. And Ant Sandwich. So for Ant, find him on Twitter at AntSanPhilly.
A nice big piece of bologna.
Please don't. Please, no one clip that. No one clip Ant. It's nice to have you in the middle.
A nice
piece of
bologna.
Clip that.
Hey,
double stuff, baby.
Oh
God, that sounds so much worse. Never mind.
Yes, that's
anyway,
my point.
Good to have Ant back. Good to have Bundy on the other side. All right. Before we get canceled, thanks for listening. Maybe even watching Snow the Goalie, the Only Flyers podcast. We'll be back next week. God help us. Have a great weekend, everybody. If you're going to Flyers training camp, enjoy yourself out there. Take some pictures. Tag Snow the Goalie in your pictures. We promise we won't put them up.
Where's the
on the screen? All right. God help us. All right, we're gonna go. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.